what I mean, to set their records in as well. And, you know, Ultravox was taking you probably to the Germany of the time or the Berlin of the time or something, or a different world. And then you've got a completely different world which has come from your own head, which we'll get to in a second. In fact, we'll play a track from the album and return to more Gary Numan. We're talking about a 6 music classic album of the day, which is Replicas, and taken from it, this is the Mac Man. Gary Numan and Tubeway Army from Replicas, classic 6 music album of the day. That was the Mac Man, and Gary Numan is with us. We should talk, carrying on then from what we were saying just before that track, about some of the lyrical content. Had you always been a writer at school? Had you always written stories?
I'd always enjoyed it.
Had you?
Yeah, right. And you used to get essays for your homework, and the whole class would go, I go, yippee, I loved it.
Yeah.
And they say only 4 pages. No, I'll do like 12, 20 pages, these big long essays. I wrote an essay, one of my essays was about being a rock star.
Was it?
Which she made me read out in class as an example of how not to write.
Really?
Yeah, it's really quite embarrassing.
Do you know, in an art class once, Miss Jones at our school, I was 12 or 13, I'd only just gone to the comprehensive, and one of the classes was draw what you're going to be when you grow up. And I draw a man standing behind 2 record players.
Really?
Yeah. And she said, what's that? I said, well, I want to be on the radio. And she said, oh, you'll grow out of it. It's true. True story. So, and what were you into then, as a lad, in terms of fiction? Were you reading comics as we were? Because the great thing about the 70s was all science fiction felt like it could be true. It was a brilliant era for anything which was, you know, futuristic of any sort. Because you actually thought in the year 2000, this is definitely going to happen.
Yeah. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
The thing for Replicas, a few years before that, there'd been an article in the newspaper about a group of kids that were running around London, going on underground trains. They would get off at a station, beat anyone up that was there, get back on the train and disappear again. It must have been, I don't know, 76, 77, something like that. But I remember reading that. I remember it really bothered me. I thought, horrible thing. That's where the band name Tubeway Army came from that one newspaper article.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, and also because of that same newspaper article, I started to write short stories about what I thought London might become in 20 or 30 or 50 years' time.
Yeah.
When I started to write Replicas, I decided to take those short stories and turn them into lyrics, which is why it's a kind of concept album, which is very, very unlikely. It's not like it's meant to be a prophecy of any kind, but a very unlikely version of what London may become like. So it is a science fiction album, but it isn't actually based on any of the science fiction I was reading.
No.
Although I was reading a lot. I used to read Philip K. Dick. I mean, Our Friends Electric actually is Philip K. Dick to a T, obviously. But when I actually sat down to write the songs, it was all to do with this newspaper article.
I suppose we didn't know it then, but I was trying to work out whether you were writing about this futuristic thing, this place or this time, or whether it was actually just setting yourself, it was what you were feeling at that point, but set in a future time.
Yeah.
It was actually, the you in the future there is actually the you from when you were writing it.
Very much. Well, I got Asperger's. So you've got all the kind of the problems that can bring you, which are more difficult when you're younger, before you know really what you're trying to deal with. Mixed with the fact that I was kind of a naive for too long. I was childish right into sort of early manhood. So you got a mixture of that teenagers have the no one understands me kind of attitude, and the world owes me something even though I've done nothing to deserve it. But you kind of got that kind of
righteous anger and frustration of a teenager.
Unrighteous anger. But they've got plenty of that. I had that for 2 or 3 years longer than I should have. Plus I had Asperger's, so I had a whole mass of the world doesn't understand me kind of vibe going on. And that is at the core of Replicas. So yes, definitely you've got that sort of personality that plants himself squarely in the middle of a science fiction story and moves it a few decades further on. But I'm from a personality point of view, I'm kind of all over it, because I'm then much worse than now actually, but struggled a lot with people. So the Replicas thing is, they create this machine that takes over because people are very self-destructive, and then it realises that the problem with having a smooth running society is people. So it decides to get rid of the people. Can't do that, obviously, so it creates an IQ test, a quota test. If you fail the quota test, you're taken away to be re-educated, but you never come back. And each year the quota test just goes up slightly. So over time, it thins people out.
And I mean, we just played the Mac Man, which is the sort of authority figures, the sort of robot police, is that?
Yes.
But and you think about it as it's laid out, and even from the front cover sleeve, there's not a lot of love in this world, is there? Do you know what I mean? Even the love is with robot prostitutes. There's not a lot of love. There's a lot of isolation. Yeah, what it feels like.
But that goes back to me. That's how I was, and that's how I felt. So
how then did you cope with? Because the LP, as you say, I think it's recorded in 3 days. It's mixed in 2. Down the Park comes out, but doesn't do that much commercially. But obviously, Peel plays it, and people are beginning to latch on. Our Friends Electric comes out, and within weeks is beginning to move up the charts. Yeah. And you didn't want Our Friends Electric, did you, as a single?
I got a long history of picking really bad songs for singles, which has hurt my career no end. But I think, so with a general agreement from Beggars Banquet, I thought Down in the Park I thought that should have been the first one. That was a good introduction to what I was doing.
Yeah, very much.
But I wasn't against Our Friends Electric being a single. I just didn't think that it was... there are certain things that a hit single, there are certain boxes that it has to tick. It's got to be catchy, within 3 minutes for radio to play, blah, blah, blah. There's a list of things that it needs to be. And Our Friends Electric doesn't tick any of them.
No, it was wrong on every count.
On every level, yeah. So I was aware of that. So, but I wasn't expecting to get on the radio. My entire ambition for Replicas was to get the career to such a stage that I could headline at the Marquee Club in Wardour Street, because that had been the place I'd gone to see most of the bands. And to me, being headlining there was kind of, you pretty much made it.
Yeah.
I had very limited ambition. So when when that single came out, and then we got to go on the Ogre Whistle test.
That's it, because this is the next important thing, isn't it? As the record's beginning to take off, don't you do Tour the Pops and the Old Grey Whistle tests virtually in the same week?
Same week. Yeah, couldn't believe my luck. 3 or 4 weeks after that, we're number one. Yeah. And it's number one for a month, and it all went massive really quickly.
I imagine a person who's probably quite wary of people anyway, given what you were saying. Having people jumping around, obviously excited about this record, but then being thrust in front of queues of journalists. I imagine, they sit you down, and everyone from the teen magazines to the tabloids to everyone suddenly comes and wants a piece of you. That's difficult.
But the thing I struggle with most, apart from the press hostility, which I really didn't expect, when you've just written a song, that a lot of people like, you don't expect all that kind of hostility and hatred to come from people. You know, it's a bit weird. Anyway, remember Smash Hits? That magazine?
I do. Yeah.
I did an interview with them, and the bloke, when he wrote it up, said, if I can give you one bit of advice, it's to learn how to lie.
Really?
Which I didn't understand at the time. I thought, that's a weird thing to say, you know, but in years to come, I knew exactly what he meant.
Yeah.
Because I am stupidly honest.
Yeah.
You know, I would, you know, talk about being famous, and I've always wanted to be famous. You know, I'd much rather have a Ferrari than a Cortina.
Yeah.
You know, slag him off. So I got absolutely hammered for that.
And
I never saw wanting to be successful as any kind of as a bad thing. But it was for a while. It was a really bad thing to want to. So all these other people that were becoming successful, apparently it was just being forced on them, because none of them actually wanted it. You know, I got really disenchanted with it.
Yeah.
But from a position of knowledge, for quite a while, I really wasn't sure that I wanted to be a pop star anymore.
The success of the record, because obviously the album does incredibly well. You don't tour at that point. You go back straight in virtually, because already you've got the next idea in your head, which is the pleasure principle.
Yeah.
Which is another story for another day. I'm afraid we're out of time. I'll tell you what we are going to do, though. You've got to talk us through this. We've mentioned it in passing, Our Friends Electric. Do you remember writing it?
Yeah. One of the few songs I do remember writing.
So where were you in Gooseberry? Were you
No,
in
I was
the
at
bedroom?
home. I was at home on my old upright piano.
Right.
It was slightly out of tune. And I had two songs, neither of which I could finish. One that went do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Actually, didn't go did it. That was a bit later. It was a bit more gentle. It's got like a lilting, ballady sort of thing. And one day I'm playing that back and hit a wrong note, and he went do-do. Well, that sounds better. I'll keep that. And then I had another song, which is like this piano gentle thing, and I couldn't think of it was like a chorusy part, but couldn't think of a verse for it.
Yeah.
And then one day I'm playing the do-do-do-do-do-do bit, got stuck yet again, went straight onto the other song, do-do-do-do-do-do-do. So they go together. Didn't realise they went together, and so I just stuck them together, and that's why it's so long. It's actually two songs stuck together. So my entire success is based on the fact that I can't play very well, and I couldn't write songs very well, and I ended up with this hybrid thing with a bum note in it that sold 1 million copies. So there you go.
Amazing. So the song, which was later used in a #1 mashup, was a mashup in itself in the first place.
Yeah.
It was two songs already.
Yeah, stunning lack of ability.
Just one thing about it though, the actual the spoken word parts, which turn the song into something else, they're the bit, and particularly I think on the album, because it's the second track on the album, they personalise this record so much, it brings it right to you.
Yeah.
That's the bit that makes this, which people think is, you know, robotic and everything, that's the bit which makes it human.
Well, that was those two sections are completely separate in a way to the rest of it. The rest of it is about, you know, a robot prostitute, and those two talking parts are a girl that I knew at the time. It was the first time I'd ever been used for sex, and I was shattered. In fact, on the lyrics, there's a 7 and a 4 in brackets before each spoken bit, and that's the 7th and 4th letters of the alphabet, which are GD, which are the initials of this woman who shamelessly used me. It broke my little young Asperger's heart, really. That's what all that bit is about.
I'm never going to be able to listen to this song in the same way now. Really not. Gary, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming in, and at some point we will do Pleasure Principle next.